What's good, everybody? It's your host, Dexter Henry of the NBA Exchange. Busy weekend in the NBA. So much going on in the NBA, from the conference finals to coaching, that this Monday I had to make sure I got a guest to come in. So much to talk about here. Had to bring in a longtime friend, longtime NBA writer. He is now with the Philadelphia Inquirer Senior Editor, covering the NBA and also will be covering the 76ers. We're going to talk about that. My man, DeAntae Prince. DeAntae from Chi-Town. What's up, man? How you doing?
What's up? Thanks for having me. I appreciate you. Always good to get together again.
Yeah, man. Always good getting together with you. Always good seeing you as well, too. So I know you've been on top of everything with the basketball, and got to ask you, we've seen a lot of change with coaching thus far this offseason. Well, not offseason. We're still going to the playoffs, but offseason for some teams in the NBA. In Portland, there's a huge, backlash because of the announced hiring of Chauncey Billups, and they will announce him officially on Tuesday at a press conference. What do you make of the Billups hiring and some of the other hires that we've seen thus far for coaches in the NBA?
Yeah, I think the Billups thing is complicated in a lot of ways. The first being that, as people pointed out, which is true, this was his first year as an assistant, so he doesn't have that experience that a Becky Hammond or I forget the brother's name who's now in Boston. He doesn't have that experience to help him in his position. The other part, and the most important, obviously, are the allegations and the, I guess, negligence in general that has been shown through these searches. And I don't think that's only on Portland. I think that there's a vetting process and a issue with the NBA there in general. As Billups was offered a GM job with the Cavaliers a couple years back. He sat on the Clippers bench this year, and this issue didn't come up at any point, even though obviously it's an important one, and there should have been further discussions about this and the validity of the claims around him prior to this. And then in Dallas, obviously you have a team that has a culture issue in many ways. Before there, when I was at Sports Illustrated, John Wertheim put together a story about the issues there with, sexual harassment. And then, The Athletic recently published this story just about the general decay and of the culture within, or from within, I mean. And then to go out and hire Jason Kidd, who had, issues with assault in his past, who had issues with, internal things with the team, where he kind of doesn't fit on any level, and also, lost a lot of games as a coach. So just a complicated offseason on the coaching front, and, we're just getting into it. The Blazers, as I said, they're going to formally introduce him as head coach on Tuesday. You would think, right, DeAntae, they're going to have to answer a lot of these questions that you brought up about, hey, what was the process to hiring? What was the vetting process when looking at making this decision? This is just speculation here, but do you think they're going to have to answer for those questions? Or is this kind of just going to go through the NBA news cycle and we move on to the next head coach? No, I've been reading about this the past couple of days, and to correct myself, the Boston coach is Ime Udoka. I've been reading about this the past few days and read a column from one of the big columnists out there in Portland. Like, people in that city, they really take this seriously. This isn't going to be a fly-by-night thing. O'Shea is going to get a lot of questions about the hiring, as a lot of this is being pushed on him and his relationship with Billups. So there are going to be a lot of things that need to be answered to. We talked about this a little bit offline, that Damian Lillard has received some of that backlash as well, even though he said he didn't know about this history. He did publicly advocate for Chauncey Billups and for Jason Kidd. So, he's going to get a little bit of that. He's going to have questions whenever he actually steps in front of a podium again next season. I don't think this is a thing that's going to go away anytime soon.
Not going to go anytime soon. And you mentioned Dame. Regarding him, there's reports now, Chris Haynes had a report that what's been going around this coaching search for the Trailblazers could push Lillard out of Portland. There's already been a lot of rumors about that after their first round exit to Denver. Do you think Dame stays in Portland? Do you think he leaves? Is that good for the league? Is that best for the Blazers? What do you think about the whole situation and how it could affect Damian Lillard?
Yeah, I think if if he's fed up from a basketball standpoint, then I can see that happening, right? If it's basically about being taken to task on Twitter, then I think this is, at least for him, the anger and whatever, him feeling like a little bit sort of like, I don't know, feeling like people are coming down on him because of this. I think that'll go away a little bit with him, at least like in terms of him wanting to want out from the team. Like, he's obviously been through a lot with that franchise. He's played through a lot, and his whole sort of like identity is wrapped up in being the guy who doesn't want to leave Portland, right? He had the issues with Paul George where he called him out for going to different teams. I think when KD went to Golden State, he said something as well. So if your not your entire identity obviously is Dame time and, you know, him being a great player, but a lot of the personal identity and his connection to the fans is that he has this otherworldly talent and that he wants to stay there and make it work there, despite the way that the league works now, where, you know, stars on his level, they all huddle together in masses and chase a championship that way. So the fact that he's been bucking the system and staying in Portland is a lot of why he gets a lot of love there. So I think that in that case, you know, that sort of like backlash side could subside a little bit for him. But if it's a basketball issue, after years and years of sort of going through the ringer and not having enough help, then that's different if that's sort of rising to the surface because of this.
It's going to be interesting to see if Dame stays loyal. Now, I'm going to move over to Chi-Town, your hometown. Chicago Bulls had an interesting season, did not make the playoffs, but they made the trade for Nikola Vucevic that we saw. They have a very interesting offseason coming up. What did you make of, let's go first back to the trade. What did you think of that trade for the Bulls and how that sets them up for the future? Do you think that was a trade they needed to make to surround Zach LaVine with some another player of talent of his caliber?
Yeah, I mean, I liked the trade when it first happened, and I still, I'm still a little bullish on it. Like, to, you know, use that turn of phrase. I don't mind the trade at all. I feel like they were sort of reaching an impasse where Zach LaVine's game has started to rise so much that he wasn't on the same trajectory as the players around him, you know, namely like Wendell Carter, Kobe as well, where he needed somebody who could help him on a, you know, in an immediate way. So I think the team did have to make that decision, and they obviously did that with the playoffs in mind for this season. They wanted to make a push to make the postseason after, I think, 4 years being out. They haven't made it since Jimmy Butler was traded. So that on that side, things didn't go as they planned. But I still think that, you know, there were some circumstances that really hampered them in that process. You know, Vucevic came in at a time where there wasn't a lot of practice. They couldn't really gel together. And then Zach was in COVID protocols for 10 games down the stretch. And the Bulls, they had a position in the playoffs, or at least in the play-in game, and then they kind of fell out of that when Zach was out, you know. And if the focal point of your team, a guy who's averaging 27, 28 a game and made his first All-Star team and now is even about to be part of the Olympic team, if you lose that type of talent, you're going to lose out in the postseason, and that's what happened to them. So I don't think that the way their season went was any fault of Vucevic. I think that, you know, he had some struggles when he first came in, but he turned it around, and he was playing better toward the end of the season.
He absolutely was. Now, looking at this offseason for the Bulls, what do you think they need to do to add to the team so that they're solidified and in the playoffs next season? I mean, a lot of people will look at point guard. I think that's an area of need. That's a spot of need for the Bulls right there. What do you think they can do in terms of point guard? Lonzo Ball's a name I know that comes to mind for a lot of people as first.
Yeah, that name has been in connection with them a lot. Jamal Collier, who covers the Bulls there, he recently wrote a story where he kind of included Ben Simmons, but that's just like news du jour right now. I think, you know, Dinwiddie is a free agent, and it looks like I forget my man's name, but somebody just reported at the Daily News that Dinwiddie is likely to decline his option and to become a free agent.
Christian Winfield.
There we go, Christian Winfield. I wanted to make sure that we got his name in there. But so, I mean, that's a situation that could be good for them. The point guard is obviously where they need to be solidified. I think that Patrick Williams has a bright future on the wing. You obviously have Zach at the 2. You have Vooch. You have Thad Young, who, he could leave this offseason, but I think they really like what he brought to them. He's a guy who's really versatile, could even guard bigs at times, which, Vooch isn't necessarily the best on defense, so that was a big help to them. So I think point guard is the spot. Lonzo has been connected to them, and Dinwiddie has been connected to them as well. I think that those guys would be solid fits. They still do need a player who can make shots from the outside and who can add a little bit on offense. Just because they still have guys who are coming along, and then Kobe suffered a shoulder injury, so he's going to be out for 4 months. So even if he comes back for the beginning of the season, he's still going to be sort of making his way in. So yeah, there's a lot to do there, but point guard is where they need to start.
All right, now moving for you to Philadelphia. We talked about Ben Simmons before. You now will be covering the league and a lot of focus on the Sixers. They are going to be a team of much discussion this offseason, DeAntae. I feel like the biggest question around the Sixers right now is, what does the team need to do? And specifically, what do they need to do with Ben Simmons? What do you think the outlook for this team is going to be this offseason?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough situation, right? Unless you're in that franchise, you kind of don't know what's going on with Ben from a mentality standpoint, which is the most important part to me, I think. There are these videos surfacing of him in high school shooting like step back threes against contested where guys are guarding him. So it's a little tough. Obviously, there was a mentality switch at some point. Even in the first couple years, he was taking those mid-range shots. I watched him play at LSU. He wasn't afraid to shoot, and he wasn't afraid to be fouled either. So I think that's the issue. I would get him with a sports psychologist or something like that. I would basically exhaust every option before I went to the trading situation. I mean, this is a guy who was All-NBA third team a year ago, right? In 2020, he was, an all-star, all-defensive this team, obviously has the point guard chops. I think there's a lot there. And to, basically get rid of a guy at this age, I think he's, 24, 23? To get rid of a guy at this age with that sort of versatile talent would I think that's something that you could end up regretting down the line. And yeah, it's tough, obviously, because there's supposed to be a 1-2 punch, and Joel Embiid is ready now. And even with Joel, you might have sort of a smaller window, because every postseason he's almost exhausted from carrying this team, and different injuries pop up. This year he played with a slight meniscus tear in his knee, so that window is important. And when you're a GM or a coach, the window is, we know that their shelf life in those positions are really short. And obviously Morey and Doc have experienced that before. But I do think you need to exhaust any option or every option before you get rid of a talent like that. And I think that people who are advocating for trading Ben Simmons right now are maybe being a little bit too reactive and having a little bit too much of a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, I've already talked to some folks in Philly. We want him out now. Probably.
I mean, from a fan standpoint, it's different. I mean, they're passionate. I get it from a standpoint that whatever. But I'm just saying, if you're coming to it from a little bit more high-minded, just looking at the pieces in front of them, I think you have to give it a little bit more consideration.
Yeah, got to give it a little bit more consideration. Give it some time. You laid some good options, including sports psychologists. Let's look at what's going on now in the conference finals. Bucks take a 2-1 lead last night over the Atlanta Hawks in the Eastern Conference Finals. But when I'm watching the Bucks, DeAntae, at some point I'm just man, I'm not that impressed with their offense. At some point I'm just how did they get here? Or do you look at the Bucks? I mean, it looks like they could go to the finals, especially with this Trae injury. We'll get to that in a second. But do you look at the Bucks as a championship team right now?
I mean, this is a wild year, right? I mean, clearly they have what it takes to win a championship this year. And the same goes for, Phoenix. Phoenix is a super young team, right? So, and they're the team that I think could probably come out of the West and end up facing the Bucks. Those aren't, teams that have historically been in the finals, right? The Bucks, I don't think they've been there since Kareem.
Yep.
Phoenix has never won a title, and they haven't been there since '93 when Charles Barkley went against the Bulls. So these are teams that historically haven't been in this position, and I actually think it's a fun thing. The problem is that a lot of this came about because of injury, obviously, with Anthony Davis, and now we have this Trae situation that might have an impact on the Eastern Conference Finals. But I kind of saw the Bucks going through the Hawks regardless. My thought was that Nets series against the Bucks in the second round was really the Eastern Conference Finals. So that's what I'm thinking. And they seem like they're destined to get to that finals. The real test is going to be when they come up against, a team with a little bit more firepower. Obviously, the Hawks are a good young team, but they have Trae. If you face a team like the Suns, then, you got Chris Paul to deal with, you got Devin Booker to deal with, and then you have a big guy like Ayton who's proven that he can guard the best bigs in the league. He gave Jokic a hard time, and that's a player who's a little bit more versatile than Giannis. That's the reigning MVP. So, we'll get to see what Giannis is made of in that case, and then we'll get to see what Ayton can do from a defensive standpoint. But he's having a breakthrough postseason.
Yeah, he really is. He's been balling out. Now, on the Hawks side of things, Trae Young, unfortunately injured, steps on the referee's foot, rolls his ankle last night. The concern right here is, can the Hawks, you saw how their offense was once Trae Young went out the game, can the Hawks win this series or even be competitive without Trae Young?
I mean, the clear answer is no, right? Like, for this to be his first postseason is crazy. He's really had a transcendent, coming out party in this postseason, as a lot of those guys who are in their first postseason have. Devin Booker's among that group too. It's crazy to think that these kids, this is the first time that they've been on this stage, because they don't look it. They're not afraid of the moment at all. A lot of people kind of compared that with Ben and Trae, where Trae could be 5 of 20, 5 of 23. And when it gets down to the last 8 seconds, he's not passing the ball. He wants that shot. And, if he passes the ball, it's because he drew the entire team and he sees that somebody else has a clear position to help his team. But I don't really see this team doing much without him. He's the focal point. He's having 20 games basically every night, 30 and 15. There's no way to replicate that. Just like in terms of the gravity and the pull that he has that opens up things for his teammates too. He's like Steph in that way, where if he doesn't have the ball, 2 eyes, 3 eyes are always on him. And that's helping a guy like John Collins, get open for a corner 3. So this is going to be a tough situation for them. They need him at 100% at all times. So if he's 80, 85, 90, they're going to have problems, because Drew is he's tough on defense. And if he smells blood, he's going to get all over Trae.
Yeah, I expect that. So, it could be curtains for the Hawks soon. Speaking of curtains, in the Western Conference, Suns, they now have a 3-1 lead.
Yep.
The Clippers, they're looking to come back and get another series. You're laughing already.
Well, because it made me think about when Chris Paul was 3-1, up 3-1 with the Clippers. That's why.
Good.
He didn't want to talk about that the other night.
He didn't want to talk about that the other night. Good. I'm glad you brought that up. So I got to ask the question. Well, can the Clippers make a comeback from a 3-1 lead? We've got Game 5 tonight, or is it 1-2-3 Cancun for the Clippers tonight? Do you see a comeback, or is this a wrap?
It might be Cabo. I don't think Cancun is that nice.
I would have to agree.
Yeah, I think they moved on. But I mean, it's going to be tough for them. This is a team that went 0 for 12 down the stretch on shots that could have tied or given them the lead in that fourth quarter. So it's going to be tough. I mean, I know that they've been down 0-2 before, but 3-1 is a different beast. Chris Paul has been through so much to even get to this point. And if he's healthy, he's not letting this team lose. This is his real shot, where you don't have to go through LeBron. You don't have to go through Steph. You don't have to go through Kevin Durant. They have a real opportunity here. Obviously, you have to go through a 2-time MVP and Giannis, but I think that's a different situation, because Giannis hasn't been there before and he hasn't proven himself on that stage in the same way that Chris Paul is, a perennial point guard and a guy who's been really good for years, and he wants that moment. Once the Clippers lost Kawhi, it was always going to be an uphill battle. Paul George has obviously had some moments where it was a little bit shaky, but for the most part, I think that he's done his best to kind of carry this team. The free throw line issues, have been a problem. Him and DeMarcus Cousins had some issues there where they were down 2 the other night against the Clippers or against the Suns, and really could have made the game a little bit murkier. But it was always going to be an issue once Kawhi was out. That's a top 5 guy. That's firepower in the same way that we were talking about Trae Young. That's firepower that you can't replicate. You're not getting that from a Patrick Beverly. You're not getting that from a Reggie Jackson, even, who's actually been really good in these in these playoffs. You just can't replicate that. And while Paul George has had some huge games where he goes for 38, that's not necessarily his forte on a night to night basis. He's a guy who, to a fault, defers to teammates at times. And if he sees somebody open, he's thinking he's playing the game right, even in moments where he needs to be a little bit more assertive. So, I don't see it happening. Not this time.
Don't see it happening. 1, 2, 3, Cabo. That's
yeah. There we go. We got to update that.
We got to update that. You're right. It's time to update that for sure. Last thing, DeAntae, you kind of, the way it sounds, it sounds like you think it's probably going to be a Bucks-Suns final. This year, as you said, has been crazy, right? And a lot of it probably comes down to who's the healthiest, who's not in COVID protocols, who doesn't have the injuries to worry about. So when you're looking at that potential matchup, or just if we want to keep all the 4 teams that are left, who do you think wins it all this year at this point right now?
I'm thinking the Suns. I feel like they have, even though, Chris Paul obviously has had an injury this year, he's had COVID protocols, even though I think the report said he was vaccinated and he still had this issue. But, there's really no way to escape that. And it would be terrible if that ended up impacting the finals, like it almost changed the Western Conference Finals. But I'm thinking the Suns have a little bit more of a reliable team. Like, they have 6 to 7 guys that they can rely on every night, and that's tough to beat. You can go down the line. Guys like Cam Johnson, Cam Payne, Mikal Bridges, like all of those guys have stepped up in this moment, and they're all super young too. So, they're going to be eager in this moment. And I think the trick for the Suns is not to get too excited or not to get away from what they've been doing too much. But they have that trio in Ayton, Booker, and Paul that they can really rely on. I think the Bucks have been a little shakier. Like Middleton, obviously, he had the 38, the 20-point fourth quarter where he went off, and he does come up big in big moments. I will say that about him. But he has been a little bit up and down based on where he's playing. When he's at home, he plays a lot better. When he's on the road, it's a lot tougher. And I don't, in the finals against this type of team, Chris, and like I said about Drew earlier, Chris Paul is going to be salivating at this moment. This is going to be the type of thing that solidifies his career, the type of thing that's going to be mentioned, when he's in the Hall of Fame. So I'm picking the Suns. I don't think it'll be a cakewalk for them at all either. But that's my thought. What you thinking on that?
Oh, I'm with the Suns too. But here's the thing, DeAntae. I'm sure neither of us would have picked the Suns at the beginning of this year, or would have said, "Hey, this could be a Suns-Bucks finals." Nobody probably
wouldn't even pick to go to the playoffs. But a lot of people, like, this was supposed to be another one of those OKC sentences for Chris Paul.
Right. And so, look, he's got him in the finals. I think that, like you said, I think they're the most balanced team left. I don't think Chris Paul's passing up this opportunity to get this done. He really wants to get this done badly. He knows, like you said, what it could do for his career. He's already a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest point guards ever. But this puts him in another status if he can get this ring. So, yeah, I'm gonna rock with the Suns on this one. I think they'll get it done. I think the Bucks offense is just too shaky for me to trust on that one. So we'll see.
And the good thing for us in the media is that'll start a lot of off-season Giannis conversations too. So there was already that, when they couldn't make it out of the Eastern Conference Finals. So they make it to the finals and lose to Chris Paul. And then the next year he has to deal with the full Brooklyn team, and he has to deal with,
Mm-hmm.
AD and LeBron being healthy, it's going to start some conversations. And then Steph and Clay too. We people forget, like, that team isn't, they're not done.
It's a great point. This is probably Giannis's best shot to win, but
this is the year to steal one for Giannis or Chris Paul, for sure.
It is, but I put my money on Chris Paul if I had to. That is DeAntae Prince. He is now senior editor for the NBA and covering the Sixers for the Philadelphia Inquirer. DeAntae, my brother, was glad to have you on the NBA Exchange.
Yep, thanks for having me, man. Always good.